Well, the African Film Academy AFA, organizers of the renowned African Movie Academy Awards, AMA, has announced the nominations for the eagerly awaited 20th edition of the awards. The announcement, which was held in Lagos, had prominent members of the jury, the Screener College, and the AFA board in attendance. This year's AMA theme celebrating African creativity is being held in partnership with the Lagos State government. At the unveiling of the 2024 AMA nominations, Sigwe outlined an exciting lineup of events for the 20th edition. Now, these events are designed to celebrate African cinematic excellence and bring together industry professionals from across the continent. The weekend, the Nigerian movie by Uche Okocha clinched 16 nominations, while Femi Adebayo's Jagu Jagu secured 7 nods.
Main event is like everything just coalesces in there, and it's a night of fun, and it celebrates African cinema. So it's like Africans telling their own story and exporting something positive out of Nigeria in particular, but mainly out of Africa on the global stage. So that's I think that is very positive for Africa and indeed for the world, because it shouldn't be everything negative coming out of Africa. There should be some positive story.
Definitely the key thing is they need to stay authentic to the story. But I believe the promoters, because one is aware of one or two of them, would do their best to ensure that the essence of the book, Things Fall Apart, is not lost. We'll see how that goes. But AMA, like I said, the 20th year is an iconic event, and we believe that those who come, and we are expecting to have an interesting international delegation as well from all parts of Africa and beyond.
For the best that Africa and the African diaspora has got to offer for this year in terms of different genres of film. Of course, feature films are usually like, the big deal. But of course, it's not just about feature films alone. Directors who are into animation will be celebrated, short films, documentaries, and then films that are made by Nigerians who are living abroad, which is quite distinct from films made by Africans in the diaspora, because AMA is also about celebrating, acknowledging them, and honoring African filmmakers who are in.
All right, let's move to the interview segment of the day. Of course, we go beyond the Nigerian borders and speak to an authority in the Ghanaian film industry. Juliet Ya Asantewa Asante is the CEO of the National Film Authority of Ghana. Of course, she's a recent past board chair of the National Film and Television Institute, NAFTI, of Ghana, and the founding president of the Black Star International Film Institute, which are the organizers of the Black Star International Film Festival. And Juliet served on the World's Economic Forum's Global Entertainment Council for 2 years, playing a key role in the council's strategic direction. Thank you very much, Juliet. Of course, she is she's one of the first people to pioneer the idea of short films made especially for mobile phones. Thank you very much for joining us at this point, all the way from Ghana. And of course, I'll say Akwaba.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so excuse me. So we've met on a couple of times now at recently the Nigeria International Film Summit, and there you espoused on the need for the creative industry, especially in Nigeria and Ghana, to collaborate and ensure that it becomes bigger and better. So Hollywood can even come here and do a lot with us. Mm-hmm. But looking at the African Cinema Summit, what exactly informed the creation of this summit?
Well, a lot of things. First, let me say hello to your audience and state that I myself, being a filmmaker and having worked around or down the value chain of film, I'm keenly aware of what the gaps are. Mm-hmm. And so when I got the position as the film commissioner or the CEO of the National Film Authority, it was very clear to me what are some of those gaps, and most importantly, that we need to work together as a continent. Speaking about gaps, it's interesting, before you came to my interview, we were talking about films and all that. Yeah. And we are making great films, but there's a big blockage in the marketplace, down the value chain across the continent. And so if you make a film, as a filmmaker, you may not have access to the kind of market that your contemporary outside of the continent can have access to. That means that you're not going to grow. And Africans, we are one people. So, for instance, if a Nigerian film comes out and comes to Ghana, there pretty much isn't any difference. And if a Ghanaian film goes to Nigeria, there are tribes in Ghana that originate from Nigeria. There are foods that are similar, cultures and all that. But most importantly, this is, reflected across the continent. And so the Africa Cinema Summit is where stakeholders, especially those in the marketplace, cinema stakeholders who are the exhibitors, meet, including filmmakers and all stakeholders down the value chain, including government, meet to discuss what the opportunities are, address those issues, and try to, to close those gaps. And business happens, networking happens, learning happens, opportunities happen. Those are some of the things that the Africa Cinema Summit is designed to address. And it's interesting that this is the first time ever that this is happening on the continent, which in itself speaks a lot. And so you see, we go to markets on other parts, in other parts of the world, but we never really meet on the continent to address the issues that are particular and pertinent to us and try to open the marketplace and bottlenecks for filmmakers. And that's what this agenda is for the Africa Cinema Summit.
So I see that Idris Elba is going to headline this year's summit. Can you tell us more about this development and why this decision was taken?
Well, I mean, Idris, and I must say, of course, Idris is half Ghanaian, half Sierra Leonean, and this is the Africa Cinema Summit, has been the mouthpiece in trying to drive the attention to Africa on the global stage. I mean, we're talking pretty much the biggest star, if not on the continent landscape, on the global landscape. And so, his voice as to the importance of growth in local content, the marketplace and all, I think has been very loud. And so, Idris was just the right person, first of all, to draw global attention to the continent to say, hey, we are no longer just spectators, but we do quality content that can travel anywhere else in the world. And, and look at me, and this is where I'm from, and this is what I'm doing, and these are my people. But as well, I think as a movie star whose films, do very well in the cinemas globally, it's also pertinent that he be at the table to, try and throw the spotlight, but also bring his thoughts to the conversation. This year, we are focusing on the growth of quality local content. And as well, we are thinking about reimagining cinema for Africa's mass market, because it will, for instance, you would be interested to note that The Tribe of Judah, for instance, that was one of the biggest films, if not the biggest films, on cinemas in Nigeria. Less than 0.5% of the Nigerian population watched that film. Could it be access? Could it be affordability and all of those things? You can imagine if that film had traveled, of course, largely or larger across Nigeria, but not just that. If that film had traveled across Africa, we're doing a small calculation and saying if that film had even reached 10% of African communities, that film would have been clocking over $750 million. And so those are some of the numbers that we need to look at. And if you look at the US, for instance, some of their big blockbuster films, are able to reach over 35% of their population. Africa will soon hold over half of the world's youth population. It is time that we focus on that market. We are the future for consumption on globally, and it's important that we figure out and strategize a way to reach our people within communities. And cinema is all about community. You can go to any other marketplace and all of that. There's VOD, there's television. All of those marketplaces are important, but cinema remains the biggest. And filmmakers need to have access to cinemas on the continent of over 1.4 billion people. that have access to less than 1,700 screens. In fact, Nigeria has access to less than 200 to 300 screens, which is a shame. And so Idris at the table, I think, is a critical voice, joining other high profile guests, including the Minister for Tourism and Arts from Rwanda, our own minister, and people across the value chain globally, and studios and cinema exhibitors and filmmakers and all that, to try and chart a clear future for our space. And this is really, really so exciting.
All right, so I'll tell you, so one other thing that's exciting is the fact that the lady that just asked you the question is also a Ghanaian, so she's your sister here. Of course.
Oh my gosh.
Medasi, Theophilus.
Okay. All right. So, okay, before we even go to a point where she will have to speak the language, and two of you have to converse in that realm before we end the show, let's talk about the growth of quality local content, and also how can African cinema, African filmmakers, we're not just talking about Nigeria and Ghana alone, we're talking about Sierra Leonean filmmakers, Nigerian filmmakers,
Absolutely.
and all of that. How can they collaborate to ensure that we grow the African cinema, thereby growing local content?
And it's important you ask this question. And of course, you mentioned that just a month ago, I was in Nigeria preaching collaboration, and perhaps drawing the lines as to how familiar or similar we are as a people. I already mentioned that there are tribes in Ghana, that can trace their origin to Nigeria. There are tribes in Ghana that actually pray in Yoruba. There are some places in Nigeria that you would go that you would see Ghanaian houses because, so we are so closely tied, and that reflects across the continent. I myself, for instance, grew up a little bit in Liberia, and, it feels like home in every way, in costume, in culture. Even if you go to East Africa, to Southern Africa, my last film in 2015, Silver Rain, I shot, in 2 African countries and casted from 5. And you couldn't tell the difference. We shot between Ghana and South Africa, and you couldn't tell the difference even, from exterior shots. And so, collaboration is so important. Immediately, it opens up several markets for you. I mean, recently we had a collaboration. Ghana had a collaboration with Kunle Afolayan's Anikulapo, which is on Netflix. And when that show comes out, you would see that Ghana, is in there squarely. And I can say that production perhaps is going to be so great because it's a collaboration between 2 African countries. And immediately it opens the Ghanaian market to that film, even on Netflix. And so, our ancestors had a proverb, or we have a proverb that says that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. There's another proverb that says that a stick can never be as strong as a broom. And so it's time we tell our stories, wanting to pull back on another proverb that says, if the lion doesn't tell his story, the hunter will always be king of the forest. So it's time that we tell our stories to our people. Our stories originate way before colonial times. It's important we tell those stories to ourselves. But as well, we can't just remain spectators on the global terrain, just watching other people tell their stories. We need to take our stories to the world. The world is hungry for it, and there is opportunity for us to do that. But, individually, we are too small. Ghana is too small as an individual country. Even Nigeria is too small as an individual country. Sierra Leone, Liberia, South Africa, Morocco, all of these countries perhaps may do great individually, but we will find that working together is going to open up a great landscape for us and shoot us to the top. So one of the things that will be prominent at this year's summit is creating a strong African cinema network. And so, like I said, you can imagine you release a film in Nigeria, you access the market in Nigeria, immediately you come to Ghana, you go to South Africa, you go to Zimbabwe, Tanzania, all of those places. And so we need to work together more. Of course,
Okay.
there are some barriers which one English-speaking African countries need to, for instance, even work with French-speaking African countries. Sometimes when Ghana and Nigeria we speak, it's almost as if we share borders, but actually we are divided and surrounded by French-speaking countries. That's a market that is important. And so we need to figure out a strategy for crossing borders. You know, the United States of America is full of states that could be individual countries, and yet when you're crossing borders, you don't need visas, you don't need passports, markets are accessible across lines. This is what we are seeking to duplicate. Obviously, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is there. How can we as a space and how can we as filmmakers take that opportunity and say, look, we already charting the path. You know, our former president who, led us to independence, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was
Thank
big on
you
that,
very much.
Africa needs to work together. And so we are basically just holding that fort and moving forward and saying that let's do this together. We are better working together than alone.
Thank you.
Yes. We're better working together. So
Yes,
I will leave you
are.
to converse,
Yeah.
both of you to converse
Let's
in your languages, in your language for just a bit.
There are lots of languages
Okay,
in
what
Ghana.
there should be
there's
there's one factor. All right, go on.
Unya. Unya. Boko.
What's it?
Etise.
But yeah, but I was
Okay.
That's it. I just asked her how is she. I just asked her how is she. Don't mind. Telephone is trying to look for our trouble today. Don't mind.
So we do hope that we will be able to come to Ghana to cover the Africa Cinema Summit. If Ghanaian authorities are willing to sponsor us, no problem. We are willing to come over.
Yes.
But we are all good in all of this.
I'm willing to walk the grounds of my motherland once again.
All right. Of course, we will not talk about the fight between Nigerian and Ghanaian jollof. We'll just
because I mean, like Ghanaian jollof is the best.
Friends, so we don't leave it
Ghanaian
there.
jollof is the best. Yes, I said it.
All right. Thank you so much, Juliet Yah Sentua Sante, the CEO of the National Film Authority of Ghana. Thank you so much for talking to us and for giving us insights into the collaborations that African filmmakers are getting into to ensure the growth of the film industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
And thank you for having me. And I say hello to everyone, and I expect everyone to come to Ghana. Ghana is home to you too.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much. Of course, that ends this entertainment segment on the Breakfast Show. I'm sure you enjoyed yourself.